Witnessing a show getting swept under the rug of obscurity freaking sucks. We've seen this happen way too many times with any sort of medium, and animation is no different. A show that seems to have a large following doesn't matter to the major companies if that following doesn't match the target audience they're going for. Nickelodeon, and even more recently Netflix, are prime examples of this. So why do companies decide to pull the plug before a show can really get going? For that, I decided to travel back in time, a time where the freelance police came and went away with one call. Now I am honest, this show definitely did not come at a time where I would remember it fondly, as it came out a year after I was born in '97. Even then, this franchise has a very obscure history. Created by Steve Purcell, the series kicked off in 1987 as a comic book series that lasted for 10 years. Coincidentally, around the time the comics took a halt in '97, we got introduced to Sam and Max in an animated series. What's surprising is that Sam and Max won a Gemini Award for Best Animated Series over many series that had a much longer lifespan in 1998. What's going on, guys? This is Editing Jason here, and I'm just letting you know right now that on IMDb they have a different winner, and for them they have Sticking Around as the winner, which is, completely different. Now, of course, both websites aren't really the best sources overall, so just take these points with a pinch of salt. Take it as you will. Editing Jason out. The other contestants were Sticking Around, Reboot, Ned's Newt, and Arthur? Yo, that's crazy! It's insane how this series was cut short after one season. But I'm very curious to see how the show was and what were the reasons within the show that made it have a short lifespan. So, yeah, this animation is certainly all over the place, to say the least. The show overall is considered to be very wacky and relies on a large amount of slapstick comedy, so I can tell the animators went all out with the variety of the scenes. With that in mind, the show's visuals are a lot to take in. I can't lie, when I binged the show a few times, I had to look away from the screen because of how much that goes on within the series. The thing that annoys me the most is how they used weird backgrounds when they wanted to express a certain emotion in its most extreme state. While I do think the designs of the characters are very nice to look at when it does slow down the pacing, it feels like a rare occasion with how much they want to be in your face with the action. There are a lot of explosions, but I will say they explode things in a creative way. I also like to note how funny it is that within the show, Sam and Max were not allowed to have their iconic weapons, but we see them use RPGs and had a roach carrying what I think is some kind of AK? Don't judge me, I don't care for weapons like that. I guess the thinking was, since there's no way a 10-year-old kid could get a hold of weapons like these, that it was alright to show? I don't know, man. The world building throughout the show was certainly the brightest note within the animation. They do a great job in distincting each location they go to. Really playing around with the character designs of the worlds they dive into were certainly interesting and fun to see interact with our two main protagonists. From a dinner monster to Antho Rats, there are a lot of interesting characters we get to meet each episode. At the end of the day, I do think the animation has some charm to it, though I think I would have given it higher praise if it wasn't placed at high speed 99% of the time. And the less we say about the bean shots, the better. Shut up! Buckle up, Buttercup, cause when it comes to the characters that were introduced, You're in for a wild ride. What better way to start things off than with the two that are the stars of this particular show, Sam and Max. I think it's better to put these two together because they are incomplete without one another. With Sam, he is considered to be more of the straight man of the duo. While he has unhinged tendencies, he does think a bit more logically and is the one that comes up with the plans to solve the situations they're in. Meanwhile, when it comes to Max, yeah, he's just insane. He throws logic out of the window and goes into danger head on. He is a major masochist and he embraces that role within the duo. Heck, Sam enables that pretty often. I think the main thing about them is that they are very hyperactive no matter who or what they interact with. They increase the ecstatic nature of the show and, well, the problem with that is the show doesn't give them a lot of characters that counter that sporadic nature Sam and Max has. Out of all the characters that were introduced to us throughout the show, there's really one recurring character that tries to tone them down. That was Darla Guggenheek.
Please, my friends call me the geek.
Yeah, that's much simpler. So the big thing about the geek is that she is the smartest character within the entire series, hands down. Being the main scientist and car repairer of the duo, she tries her best to make sure the boys stay on task and try to be the voice of reason in certain situations. While I do think a girl genius in that time could be considered rare, she's heavily underutilized. Like, cool, she's got the UN and the government on speed dial and is in the conversation to fix the world's scientific global issues. However, she's rarely seen outside of a handful of episodes and doesn't play a big role in most, if any, adventures. When she was the first character we've seen and how she reacted to this monster fridge sneaking up on her, I thought we were going to get a pretty dope female character that aids them and makes pretty cool gadgets from time to time to help them with whatever wacky mission they're getting into. Instead, the only thing we get is that she's more candid, and there's no more to her until the second to the last episode. I really wanted more from her compared to what I've gotten. Now let's get into Lorne.
The friend for life.
I don't know if this is a character that calls out obsessed fans over the franchise, but this is a character that doesn't sit well with me. Yes, this is a character trope that we can find throughout an abundance of shows, and there are some that I have enjoyed. I think the biggest thing is that an ecstatic, rapturous character being obsessed with other ecstatic, eccentric characters really turns into a convoluted mess of a story. Like with the geek, there's no other layers outside of what he is at face value. When that happens to a character that you could care less about, it makes certain episodes unbearable to watch. And don't get me started on the villains. These may have somewhat interesting designs, but goodness, they are the definition of one-dimensional. Each villain is only introduced twice, which is their debut and the finale when they all band together. All the villains have some sort of gimmick, but that's the only way to differentiate between all of them. Like they all want to form the world to their own image or destroy the world entirely. But darn it, give me some sort of substance. Tell me why. But now you're starting to see the theme here about this. Segues are fun. Yeah, with all the gripes I have about the characters and their personalities, I think you can tell my feelings on the story overall. Just like the animation and characters, it's all kind of thrown at the wall and praying that something sticks. There is a severe lack of structure within each episode. Yes, this is considered to be episodic, outside of the finale. However, there are some small details that they included that show up maybe once or twice. The biggest is that prior to the intro, there was a shtick where a character names the main protagonist of the show and someone says,
Sam and who?
And I love that. Plus, there were endings of the episode where they wrap it up in a comic strip. Both of these little moments were fantastic for a show like this. So why were those rarely featured in this season? Because in doing so, it helps give the show some sort of structure. And that is without a doubt the biggest issue the show has: lack of structure. They focus so heavily on the action and extremely loud dialogue that I could not get a full understanding of what is happening throughout an episode. If you look away for one moment, you might have missed a large portion of an episode and wonder what happened for them to be in this predicament. There is no time for us to breathe and get a grip as to what's happening. You can argue that, well, this show was targeted for the 8 to 11 boys demographic back in the day. However, you can say the same for Ren and Stimpy, Recess, and Animaniacs. I can keep going. There are shows that can be chaotic in nature, but there is structure to that chaos. Sam and Max do not have that. Not to mention, there's a lot of propaganda in this show. Out of all the shows within this era I've looked back on, this one pushes the pro-American stigma hard. Not saying it's a bad thing to do so, but the way they go about it makes it seem like they're trying to pick up brownie points. Something that certainly wouldn't work in today's standard in animation for sure. So yeah, I think the biggest reason as to why this particular show didn't get greenlit for a second season is that the show relied too much on the ecstatic nature of the main duo and had no clear direction or structure within the episodes themselves. The characters had very little interesting personalities, if at all. It's a shame, because there are certainly some aspects that can gain interest. I think a show where a duo do tasks with some of the most obscure and wacky tendencies can work in a myriad of ways. But in this case, they really dropped the ball with a lack of consistency and no real structure to be had in order for the show to have any memorable moments. Out of all the media Sam and Max had fallen into, considering the praise I've heard when it comes to the other forms of entertainment they're involved in, the TV series was considered more of a dud for me, unfortunately.
Just wait and see. That phone is gonna ring. It's gonna. Any second now.
Thanks for taking the time to see this review. It's been a while since I've done a Remember video, and I think it's good to take a bit of a trip down memory lane. Although this one was a bit bumpy. Also, I enjoyed my time at MomoCon, met some really awesome people there. And a quick announcement, I now have a coffee, for those who want to support but not deal with the monthly hassle. To buy me a coffee, go to coffee.com/JasonBlade. Thanks to the Grapes on Patreon. If you would like a shout out or view the latest video a day prior, go to patreon.com/JBladeReviews. Until then, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.